Welcome to the Sharpe Way show. Yes, another awesome day, 7 p.m. Eastern, and I'm here yet again, and I'm so happy that you have joined me tonight. Of course, look, if you want to make sure that this show gets out and that people see it, you got to do me a favor. You got to like, you got to comment, you got to share. Let people know this is happening. The more you do that, the better. The more you do that, the more people will watch this. And again, please go ahead on Facebook. Like that on Facebook, subscribe to my YouTube, and of course, follow me on Twitter. Today, I have a very special guest. Today, someone who actually I found from LEAP, law enforcement, at one time was against prohibition. I'm not sure what it stands for now, but that's
Action
what it did.
Partners.
Action Partners, thank you. I have the wonderful Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey is here. And the good sergeant, former LAPD, right?
Retired
LAPD. Now someone who written a recent book, and the book is called Black and Blue. Is that right?
Black and Blue, the creation of a social advocate.
There we go. Someone who's actually been on the front lines, someone who now sees what's happening. Yep, there we go, right there. Feel free if you want to. Let me show you. You head over to her website if you like, sergeantcheryldorsey.com, and you can check that out if you like. The reason why we're chatting today is because I know you have a very special way of looking at what happened with George Floyd. I mean, that's everyone's talking about it, as they should. People are rioting because of the emotion behind it. As you probably know, the Libertarian Party has been against militarization of the police for a long time. We've been against the drug war for a long time. And seeing this, drives a lot of people in the liberty movement crazy. We don't know where you dealt with this. I mean, you're a person of color. You're a woman. You are in the LAPD. Tell me where your head is here.
So when I saw this, of course, I thought, here we go again. And I've been talking about nothing has changed since Rodney King.
Yes.
Nothing has changed. And part of the reason that I believe nothing has changed is because, well, there's several reasons, but the major one for me is accountability. I hear this from family members who've lost loved ones at the hands of errant police officers. They don't want buckets of money that cities and departments are willing to throw at them because, well, it's taxpayer money and it's not theirs, it's not the officers. So they don't have a problem throwing millions of dollars at the families, and they never do anything substantively to change the policy or the procedure or to deal with the officers administratively. And so if you don't do anything to deter the bad behavior, why would an officer not kill someone?
Right.
This officer who was involved in this incident, Derek Chauvin, has been involved in 3 shootings in his career. 3.
Is that right?
3.
Oh,
the officer who stood by, the little Asian guy, Tao is, I believe, how you pronounce his last name. He has been involved in a situation where a black man was assaulted by him, beaten up, had teeth broken, and the city ultimately settled $25,000. Clearly, neither of them learned anything. And we don't know anything of the other 3 officers who can't be seen on that initial video, who are also behind the car pinning George Floyd down to the pavement. What have they been involved in? See, when you see officers do this kind of stuff and they just do it so effortlessly, that lets you know this is how they get down.
And that's the part that bothers me more than anything else, right? And I'm trying to not be anti-law enforcement because we do need cops, and I get it. I don't want to be anti-law enforcement, and I want to try to give the cop the benefit of the doubt. I want to give the cop the benefit of the doubt and say, you know what? Maybe he was afraid for his life. Maybe he was scared. But even if that were true, I mean, the video shows he wasn't. But even if that were true, and he puts his knee on a guy's neck, Floyd is already handcuffed. He's already on the floor. There's 3 of them. Even if you did feel afraid for your life, then shouldn't someone have said, hey, guy, enough, get up. The guy can't breathe. I mean, this is the part that drives me crazy, is that, to your point, the other officer, Tao, I think it was what you said, his name was Tao, he didn't even bother stopping him. At what point do you say stop, right? This is the environment that they're in.
And so, the way I was raised, if you will, on the Los Angeles Police Department is that's what a good partner does. A good partner is going to step in, whether you're just not being able to relate with someone. It could be a traffic ticket and you're getting snarky, the violator's getting snarky. A good partner will say, hey partner, let me take it from here.
Right.
Let me talk to this person. That's the whole reason that partners, when you see them engaging at a domestic dispute, you see them
Right.
split up. One takes one takes the other. If I'm talking to one of the combatants, if you will, in a domestic violence situation, and we're not relating, then I'm going to tell my partner, let's switch and let
Right.
me talk to that one and you talk to this one because we're having a personality conflict. That's what a good partner does. And we see time and time again officers acquiescing, in other words, standing by, bearing witness to police misconduct that sometimes leads in a deadly use of force. So Officer Tao certainly is culpable. He's just as guilty because listen, if you were in my car and I went to a store and I ran inside and I did something, you don't know what I did, but I actually went in and committed a crime and killed somebody. I come back out and get in your car and you drive off. If they catch you, because you look kind of like I do, guess what? You're the getaway driver. You're
That's
a
right.
co-conspirator. So these officers who stood by and did nothing don't get a pass. They shouldn't get a pass. And they might as well have had, each of them had a knee on Mr. Floyd's neck.
You know, that's the part that really has driven me crazy. It's the idea of a whistleblower culture in most police forces. That's horrible. I mean, you really can't be a whistleblower in a police force. And if you look at any other industry, right? Doctors, truck drivers, sales reps, store clerks, even professionals, right? Lawyers, whatever. If there's 8 people in a law firm and there's a bad lawyer, they're going to go, yeah, that guy, he's a bad lawyer, right? They're going to go to that truck driver and go, yeah, she's a bad truck driver, right? They're going to say that. Other people will say it. But try to get a cop to say there's bad cops. Almost impossible.
Listen, I have a term that I trademarked, contempt of cop. And what I mean by that is that if you piss an officer off, there's a price to pay. And that officer could be of any rank. It could be a police chief you piss off and there's a price to pay. It could be your watch commander who's going to be a lieutenant or a sergeant too. Piss them off and there's a price to pay. It could be your partner. Piss him off, and when you need help and you get on that radio and you ask for it, help might come, but not so quick.
Wow.
We got to stop for the red lights and the stop signs, and we don't want to go too fast. So there's a price to pay. And there's a term that we often hear police officers talk about. You guys in the civilian world refer to it as the blue code of silence and all of that. It's not backing your partner. Not backing your partner. That has a special connotation. And it's important for a police officer, your partner, to know that you will back him. Sometimes back him means that you're okay with the foolishness. Sometimes back him means that you're going to engage in misconduct, maybe criminal activity. My partners want to know, can I trust you? Are you going to back me?
So how do you handle that? I mean, you've got a double whammy, right? You're a person of color and you're a woman in LAPD. I mean, 90s and 2000s, that's a militarized force. Right?
1980 is when I joined.
That's a military force at that point, right?
Under Daryl Gates, yes.
Yes, Daryl Gates, absolutely. I mean, how were you able to even survive and get promoted? I mean, you got promoted too. How were you able to do that?
Well, part of I think my success was, first of all, I had no idea what I was doing when I joined the LAPD. I found myself needing a good paying job. I was a single mom, had just gone through a divorce, and I had a young child and a gang of debt. And I just was looking for a good paying job. I was working at Department of Justice as a secretary, and I was working with special agents who were B&E, Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement, and BI, Bureau of Investigation. They used me as a decoy in a sting because back then PCP was a big deal. So they used me as a decoy to bring in a young Black man. And when they used me as the decoy, it was so easy. And I said, is this what you guys do? And I know what special agents make, and I know what I was making. I was like, I need to do that. So I was like, how do I become a special agent? So they told me, take a test, go get on a police department. Back then I thought about the marshal's office because they were bailiffs. And I thought, well, that's easy. I'll just go work in the courts for a year. I'll get my post certification, police officers standards and training certification. I'll lateral back to DOJ as a special agent. Well, I
Sure.
started applying here, there, and everywhere, and LAPD was under a consent decree to hire women and minorities. And so they moved me
Sure.
through the process very quickly. And so once I got on LAPD, still my mindset 12 months and I'm back to DOJ. But once I got to LAPD, I realized that they had a special situation where I could work for 20 years and retire on a full service pension for the rest of my life. So I was like, well, I'm gonna just hunker down. I was young and I'm like, I'm gonna hunker down and do 20 years. I didn't know what I was doing, but here's what I did know. I knew I was a Black woman. First, I was a mother. Second, my son was very young, and I knew that I had family members and associates who really had a lot of angst with the police. I grew up in 77th Division here in Los Angeles, and so there was a lot of back and forth between the police. I grew up when the National Guard used to drive up and down our street and say, you know, you better turn left or get shot or don't go down this street because of the Watts riots, right?
Yeah.
So I made up my mind that when I become a police officer, I'm going to be a certain kind of police officer. I joined the Los Angeles Police Department because I needed a good paying job. I never bled blue. I never bought into the system. I was there for 8 hours to do what it was that I was supposed to do. I wasn't there to make friends. I wasn't there to be liked. I was there to do a job, and I did my job. And I had a problem from day one because I was one of 2 Black women in my academy class. There were 40 of us, 20 women, 20 men. Very unique at that time because remember, consent decree. So they had, our class was the biggest group of women, 20 women. I was one of 2 Black females in my group. And so my problems were immediate in the police academy, but I had just quit that DOJ job. And I'm like, I got to get through this. 6 months, torture me, call me names. I got to get through this. And then once I graduated, I got to get through the 12-month probationary period because I'm not vested.
So hold on. If you're going through this, it reminds me immediately of the movie Training Day, right? Denzel Washington, right? So I'm thinking, as you're moving into this new thing, they're going to try to test you, right? You get to 12 months, they're going to test you in some way, right? Oh, can she hack it? Can she deal with it? Is she going to back us? Is she really one of us? That had to happen to you.
Absolutely. And I talk about this in my autobiography, which chronicles my career, because when I came on the LAPD in 1980 and I was assigned to Southwest Division, which is Martin Luther King and Dinker is where the police station is. And part of my area was an area called the Jungle, which at that time, it was filled with brothers from the FOI, Fruit of Islam. They were living in the jungle, and we were having skirmishes with FOI on a daily basis. And so at that time, me looking like I look, I had a little tiny afro. And so a lot of the white officers that I worked with thought, who is she and why is she here? They started saying I was a plant from FOI. And
absolutely.
I was like, if you know anything about FOI, you know I'm not a plant.
You're not a plant, absolutely, yes.
Just the way I come to work dressed would let you know I'm not Muslim. Let's just start there. But that was the jacket that I was given. And so, but again, I didn't care. I came there for one reason and one reason only.
Got it.
Luckily, by and large, even though I had white training officers, they were good partners. They weren't there to play games with me. At that time, I was 5'9", which I am now. I weighed 118 pounds. So, you know, I was wafer thin, right? And I knew I'm a girl. And so I knew that, okay, I got to figure out how to do this. And I knew that I wanted to treat people the way I would want anyone to treat my son if you dealt with him. So I didn't come there to abuse people.
I see what you're saying. I want to cover a piece that you brought up, and I really believe this to be true. And you help me if I'm wrong here. My father was in law enforcement. He in New York City was first a cop, and then he transferred over to corrections. And he actually was a guard at Rikers Island here in New York City for many years. So I always felt that the average person who goes into the police force, they're trying to do the right thing, right? They're trying to do the right thing. Just what you said, they want to treat people like they want to be treated, that they want to do the right thing. I've always felt that it's over time where the bad cops push the system, and if it works for them, the bad cops can become monsters. The regular cops can become apathetic because they watch the bad cops get away with it. And the good cops either leave or transfer out or eventually also become apathetic because the system allows the bad cops to become monsters. I saw that when my father, he had a couple of friends who stayed in the police force when he got out. And one of them went undercover in New York City. This is the 70s, went undercover in the 70s in New York City, 60s, 70s. And when that happened, I remember him talking to me, and he was so jaded. I mean, he came up undercover and he was pointing at people, and he would actually tell me, oh, that person, that's her crime. Oh, that's his crime. And they did nothing. He was assigning crimes to people by how they looked. That's how he was judging people. He was so jaded. He eventually took his own life because he was just so jaded with everything in his world. But when I remember him earlier, when I was younger, he didn't seem so jaded. He seemed like a regular, happy guy. He left a son and a divorced wife behind him when he took his life. Am I right here that it's the system and the timing that makes most cops that are jaded? That's what makes them jaded. The average cop comes in happy and satisfied.
Here's what I believe. And I know this to be true, is that some of what we see is learned behavior. Because understand this, as a rookie, we're like little babes, and that's how they treat us. We're little babies, and they form you and mold you, and it's a certain amount of what's the term where they get in your head and try to make you their own. Not really brainwashing, but they do break you down, and then they build you up and recreate you, right? Yep. To an extent, physically they do it, and they do it also psychologically, right?
I was in the Marine Corps. I get it.
Exactly. Yes. And so LAPD was quasi-military when I came on. And so that was how they dealt with us. And so it just depends, because listen, I believed also that everyone who wants to be the police should not be. It takes a special kind of individual. And so because of who I am, I was determined. I was determined about a couple of things. I was determined, number one, to maintain my femininity, because it was very important to me. Okay, I had a vision and an idea about what female police officers look like. And I wasn't trying to look like that. So that got me in trouble, because I wanted folks to know I was a girl, right? Right. Sure. So that was one of them. And then the other thing was just to treat people right. I do the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
And so when I had occasions to work with officers who were involved in foolishness, and it didn't happen often, number one, because they didn't know what to make of me, because I didn't fit that mold. And so they were very careful not to do foolishness around me.
Got it. Okay.
They didn't know if I would back them, right?
So the disadvantage that someone might have seen, kind of in one way became an advantage.
And it worked for me. And listen, I had partners who, because they didn't like me, and back when I came on, they didn't make it a secret that they didn't like me. Right now, today they may be a little more covert about it, because
I prefer it open.
Please and thank you.
I prefer it open.
Please and thank you. Yes. And when they let me know they didn't like me, my response was, me too.
Yeah, thank you.
Works for me.
We're good.
I had partners who would sit in a police car with me for 8 hours, talk about it in my book, and not say one word, not one word to me. Arm's distance away from me. The only time we would have communication is when we would get out the car to go handle a radio call. We'd handle the radio call. They talked to one person, I talked to another. I'd get the information that I needed, because I was the rookie, so I was going to be writing the report. Sure. So I did what I needed to do. We get back in the car. I'm the passenger, because I can't drive, because I'm a passenger. I'm a rookie, right? They don't let you. So I get in the car and I turn to my passenger window, and my partner is driving. Works for me, dude. Don't talk to me for 8 hours. I don't care. I almost cursed.
That's okay. You can. This is not TV. You can swear if you want to. Don't worry. No. But I want to ask a question. I mean, you talk about the partnership a lot, right? And the partnership piece, people are asking, is the partnership, does that increase the tension? Does that make it where I have to support my partner no matter what? Is this chicken and egg, right? Does the tension of the partnership make more tension for the people you're policing, or is the tension of the partnership tighter because of the tension of the people you're policing? Which one comes first? The militarization of the police force happened the same time the war on drugs was kicking into high gear, which made a lot of people feel like the police are no longer community policing; they're an occupying force. They're a military occupying force. Did we have to support each other no matter what come from that tension of us and them, or the reverse?
I think it's just the way it is. I think
Right.
it's just the way that it is. And what they drilled into us is, first of all, we learn in a sterile environment in the police academy. And then when you get out, what your partner, your training officer will say to you is, forget everything you learned in the police academy. We do it
Ah,
different. I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you how we do it out
got
here
it.
in the streets. And understand this, because as a rookie, 12 months you're on probation, you are not vested. That
Right.
means at any point you can be asked to find a new church home. And
Right.
so as a young officer, we technically want to be pleasing to our training officers. They hold our life in their hand. They evaluate us every 2 weeks.
Got
And
it.
then every couple of months, we switch off to a new set of training officers because they want to expose you to different personalities, different
Got it.
areas in your division. But at
Okay.
the same time, you always must be pleasing, if you will, to your training officer to survive. And then for me, once I got out probation, it was like, y'all getting ready to know Cheryl.
So let me ask you a personal question on this. What do you think? What's your opinion on the war on drugs? What's your view on that? If you look at most libertarians, the vast majority are against the war on drugs and think that prohibition has made things far worse than it would have been without it. If you look at me, what I see is when it comes to the war on drugs, now people are saying, most Americans are saying, well, it's an addiction, right? Well, treat it like an addiction. But when it was tearing our communities apart in the 80s, it was just say no, double down, put you in jail, mandatory minimums. That's what happened when it was our community. But when it became, now it's America as a whole. Well, now
Right.
it's an addiction problem.
Right. And so, that's part of the system doing what the system is designed to do, right? I mean, listen, let's be clear and let's be fair. Police departments, police officers, we have a role to play in this whole, what do they call it? The pipeline, the school to pipeline, the mass incarceration, right?
Mm-hmm.
People don't get in prison unless we put them in there. And so while
Absolutely.
they were targeting low-level offenders who really were dealing with a sickness, an addiction that they couldn't overcome, never really going after the big boys, you're putting people in that revolving system.
Mm-hmm.
Some were able to get out, others not so much. And there's something very similar to that going on right now with this proposed ban on menthol tobacco products that's sweeping across the nation silently, dealing with vapors for the kids that are vaping. And listen, I'm not a smoker and I don't vape and I don't promote that, but what is happening right now real time with this menthol tobacco ban is that this gives police officers yet another tool in their chest, another reason to engage and interact with Blacks and Hispanics, because they're the ones who use menthol tobacco products, menthol, Cools, Newport for the most part. And it gives them another reason to put them in the system.
Yes,
The
absolutely.
system
So
does what
even
it's
that's
designed to
happening.
do. Yeah.
So let me go to a place there where most people don't want to go. I had a criminal defense attorney on here probably several months ago, and he used to be a prosecutor, DA, and he left. He said, you know what? I can't do it anymore. He became a defense attorney. And when they asked him why, he said, I got tired of putting brown and black people in jail. Right? So he left, and he let me know, and he really opened my eyes. His name is Venu Varghese. He opened my eyes to understanding the power that the district attorney has, right? The DA has a lot of power. If the DA is going to, tell cops, go arrest these people. I'm not going to prosecute this. I want to prosecute that. Doesn't the DA and the DA's office, all the DAs, obviously in larger communities, there's a larger office, smaller communities, a smaller office, but doesn't the DA have a lot of influence over the policing that you do?
No, my experience is that, they don't tell us what to do, but they certainly do have a symbiotic relationship with police
Okay.
departments. And so when we go out and make arrests, then what we have to do is, and I know this because I took cases to the district attorney for prosecution. And so if you don't have sufficient evidence, the DA can say, well, it's not enough. They can reject it outright, or they can say, go back and get more information so that our case is stronger, because district attorneys typically, they get graded on how many cases do you win. It's a numbers game.
Right.
And so if this isn't a winner, then I don't even want to take this to court. I'm not going to waste my time. DA reject is what we call it. Now,
DA reject, you said?
District attorney reject, right.
Got it.
And so the way this works in most instances is you'll see an officer who gets involved in a situation with someone, and I say, we have great autonomy. I can arrest you on a Friday, piss me off, contempt of cop. I'm going to arrest you on a Friday for doing a thing, and I know you didn't do it, and you know you didn't do it, but great deference is given to what I say. And so I arrest you on a Friday knowing you can't bail out. You're going to sit in jail all weekend long. Lord knows what happens to you during that weekend. And then Monday morning, my report goes to the district attorney. They take a look at it, and they say insufficient evidence. Well, I knew that when I booked you for that bullshit 148, resisting, interfering, whatever it was I said you did on Friday. I knew you didn't, but probable cause is a low threshold. I got you in the system. It's not you don't go to jail, you don't go to court, but you do have a record now because I just gave you one.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. Yes.
So to that extent,
yes.
To that extent, district attorneys do have a lot of sway and control about who they want to go after.
Got it.
And who they choose not to, because they're being judged on wins and losses.
Got it. Well, it's funny because, I think that when a cop does something wrong, a DA, and I'm not trying to say it's right, but a DA has to be concerned about that. If a DA prosecutes a cop, the DA knows that a lot of people really like cops, number one. So the odds of them winning the case go down. Not just that, they got to work with cops every day. I mean, that's who they work with every day. Do they really want to be prosecuting the people they work with every day? It's
not
really hard.
Not really. And that's why it's so important to have an independent special prosecutor when you can on cases that involve police officers, particularly somebody who, listen, because if I know you and you know me and I come to you every day and I'm like, hey, Larry, I got a case for you. I want you to take a look at it. Cheryl, what you got? And I tell you what's involved in this arrest. And you say, oh, thanks. Good job. And off I go. And you've got a winner, possibly. And then somewhere down the road, I stub my toe and you're like, oh, no, not Sergeant Dorsey. She's a good girl. Right? You know me. I know you.
Right. Just made a mistake. Let it go. Yes. Got it. Yeah, no, I get it. It makes total sense as to why that happens. And I see your point. You have to have someone independent who isn't reliant upon that relationship, and they can step in and make that happen or not.
And that same connection goes between the district attorney, that elected official, and the police chief. Because listen, understand this, all that stuff that happens, a lot of times happens over the phone. So here in LA, we got DA Jackie Lacey. All she got to do is pick up the phone and call Mike Moore, our LAPD police chief, and say, yeah, not so much. We had a situation not too long ago when Charlie Beck was the police chief, and this was a situation where he couldn't look the other way. It was an officer who shot a young man on Venice Beach, and Charlie Beck said, hey, for the first time ever, he actually recommended that DA Jackie Lacey press charges against his officer. And even in that, DA Jackie Lacey said, not so much.
Right. It's funny, you talk about police chiefs. I did work for one once. I worked for Bill Bratton. Bill Bratton, who used to be the police chief of Boston, LA for a short time, and also New York City. He had a short stint in the civilian world. And when he was in the private sector, he was my boss. I was a sales rep for him. And I remember whenever we left, one of the reasons why I assumed he was a pretty good police chief, and I don't know that, but I assumed he was, is every time we ended a meeting, he ended every meeting with, go out and do good things. That's how we ended. He would literally say, go out and do good things. That's how we ended it. But I remember other police telling me how they would end their meetings with things like, be safe or come home. That to me sends a lot of the tone of my police force. If my police chief, my leaders are saying, be safe, come back home, that's saying you're going out to war, and that's the enemy out there, right? That's what I'm telling my police force. But if I'm saying go out, do good things, I'm telling my police force, support your community. Have you seen a difference in those two? I'm assuming.
That's an assumption, because do good things could mean do good things so that I look well and make sure that your recap is high. Do good things could mean,
I like that.
Are you getting in your quota of tickets every month?
I like that.
Do good things. So listen, those guys are savvy. When you get up there to Bratton level and Beck and Michael Moore, and you breathe that special air.
Yep.
Yeah, they're good at what they do. And so that's why I'm here to decipher police code talk.
Got it. I like that. I like
Yeah.
that. So let me go to the next piece, which is there's a saying that I've heard many times, and cops have told me, my friends who are former cops or retired cops told me it's a true saying, and that is better to be judged by 12 than to be carried by 6. The idea that it's better just to do the bad thing, and if you got to go to court, you go to court, but don't let somebody shoot you. That your safety is of critical importance. Is that a real thing?
It's a thing, but I think it also depends on how you interpret that,
Okay.
because who wants to get hurt? We all want to go home. I wanted to go home. I've got children. I had a husband. And so yeah, I want to go home, and I want my officers to go home at the end of the day. But I don't want you to compromise. I don't want you to commit misconduct in the process of your safety. I want you, listen, there are certain things that are inherent to police force, to police work. Use of force is one of them. I don't
Sure.
want you to go out there and mistreat people, but I also don't want you to be hurt because you're afraid to do the things that you're trained to do.
Yeah,
And so it depends on how you interpret it.
my concern with that, what bothers me about that is I was a Marine, and I was never a combat Marine. But after the wars starting in 2002 and on, I've done a lot of training with veterans who came back, combat veterans particularly, trying to help them to kind of get back into the world, right? Get jobs, things like that. And I talk to many of them. And what I see in Marines as a general rule, and also sailors, Army, I shouldn't just say Marines, but obviously I was a Marine, so I have a special affinity to Marines. But all of our service members, when they come back, they think almost the opposite. Better to be dead than to be a coward. Better to jump on that grenade than to be shamed by unit. Better to take a round than to let someone else out there die or be hurt. And that's not all of them, obviously. I mean, people are people, but many of them think that way. And in my view, I want the cops to feel the same way.
And
I
you know
want
what? I
them to
think
feel
by
that
and
way.
large, the majority of police officers do. Police officers, by and large, don't get up in the morning and decide that I'm going to kill somebody today, or I'm going to mistreat somebody, or I'm going to abuse somebody, or I'm going to put somebody in the system unfairly. I think what happens is that there are some that are out there that are jaded, that are
Sure.
twisted. And that's why I think it's so important to have the right mindset. Background checks, psychological evaluations are critical, because if you say that better to be judged by 12 instead of carried by 6, if you say that to the wrong person, it means something completely different.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
Than what it would mean to me.
Yep.
And so that's why I think it's so important. And I don't know why police departments are so averse to this. Police officers ought to be reevaluated every, I'll just say 2 years.
Sure.
Every 2 years. Crack open their head, take a look around, and if stuff's not working right, fix it if you can. And if you can't, off to Sparklets, Home Depot, wherever their skill set is better suited. Because listen, here's what I know, that we see things as a police officer day in and day out. And I'm going to share a story with you. When I was a sergeant, we had a jumper. And this guy, we had talked to him for about 30 minutes before he finally did jump off the ledge of the building. And I was so bothered by it. It bothers me to this day to speak of it. I had a son who could have been his age. And so after that, as the supervisor, I went back to my lieutenant watch commander and I said, we need to have somebody from BSS, the psychologist, come and just be available for those of us who were there, because when that young man jumped off that building, he didn't die, not right away.
Even worse.
He didn't die. And so it bothered me. Now, when my officers got to the police department at the end of this call, BSS was there. And I asked my subordinates, hey, BSS is here. Does anybody want to talk to him? All the guys, because, you know, it's not sexy to ask for assistance, right?
Right.
All of my male officers said, no, Sarge, I'm good. I'm good. I was like, what? Yes. Because I messed all the way up. So I told my lieutenant, I raised my hand. Let me go talk to somebody. I need to have a word. And so because it's not sexy to self-report, because you don't want to get ribbed, you don't want to be hazed, maybe that's something else that police departments should do. Sit an officer down and just make sure that they're in a good headspace. We're exposed to stuff day in and day out. And if you're honest, you cannot honestly say that this stuff doesn't affect me.
Of course. It's funny. I'm talking about veterans again. It's a similar world. I had a unit coming back from Afghanistan. Then they were a reserve unit, which means they were civilians before they went there, right? They had jobs and families. And so the reserve unit's coming back from Afghanistan. And I have a class on how to put your resume together and how to translate military into civilian, that kind of stuff. And the people wouldn't show. They wouldn't show up. And I went to the person who was a civilian who was controlling the nonprofit. And I said, you have to order these guys to come or they won't come because they don't want to admit they need help. Exactly what you're saying, Sergeant Dorsey. They didn't want to admit they had help. And so the civilian's like, I can't do that. I can't order them. So I went to their first sergeant and I said, First Sergeant, can you just order your men to show up? Order them to show up. And he's like, I get it. So we ordered them. So they all came, but they actually wanted to come. But being ordered to come gave them an excuse. They could say, I don't need to be here. I got ordered to be here. So they can still be macho, right? But show up. So I see your point. You kind of have to make it every 2 years or every year. This way they don't have to admit they have a problem, but they can take advantage of the help that many of them surely need.
And listen, and it's not like police chiefs don't know that, because understand, every police chief was once a police officer.
Sure.
On the Los Angeles Police Department, when you work in the vice unit, it's a limited tour. And it's a limited tour because you're exposed to some gnarly stuff working vice, right?
Right. Sure.
And they don't want to get you too twisted.
Right.
If they understand that and they limit your tour in vice, they don't limit a tour in patrol. I spent all 20 years in patrol. I see people all day long, sometimes. I remember one of my first radio calls, I went to, a young man had been shot, and he had been shot in the stomach. And when we got there, I'm wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. This young man is sitting on the curb, holding his intestine in his hand as he's speaking to me.
Mm-hmm.
When you see that kind of stuff,
yep.
If it's not day in and day out, if you just see it once a week, you need to have a fireside chat with somebody. And so why wouldn't police chiefs want to do that for their patrol officers if they care?
Well, that's a good point, right? We're talking about training. Is it a training issue? Is it a psychological eval issue? Is it both, right? Well, what is it? Is it I feel like it's both. I feel like it's a training part where we have to spend more money and more time training cops, because you're right. They deal with the problem with the damage that cops get. Again, I'm going to keep falling back to military because it's similar in many ways. But many of the military people, the veterans who have damage, you can see it. Like they've lost a limb, they've taken a bullet. You can see it, right? But the cop damage, you can't see it, right? It's not obvious there.
It's not a scar, but you can see it. You can see it in how they have personnel complaints because of what we call a mouth beef, right? Citizens call and they say that officer was rude with me, because officers don't start off killing folks. Police officers start off being aggressive on a traffic stop. It's like, dude, I did a California stop. Why are you pulling me out the window of my car? Because something's going on with that officer. Either he's got home issues or financial issues or both, or alcohol problems, because that's an issue for police. Again, it's not sexy to talk about it. But there are always signs, and that's why when something makes national news, like George Floyd being murdered, we now know that officer, Derek Chauvin, had been in 3 shootings. I was on LAPD for 20 years in patrol, working the gang unit, working everywhere in South Central where stuff was happening. And guess how many times I got into a shooting? None. None. So I know that it can be done. And had they done the right thing, maybe in the first time this Chauvin got into a shooting, we wouldn't be here. The officer, Michael Schlager, who shot and killed Walter Scott, that wasn't the first time that he had tased somebody inappropriately. He had done it 3 other times. And someone even went to the station to complain about Michael Schlager. And what did they do? They swept it under rug because, listen, we're not going to talk about that. Maybe Schlager had his horse connected to his cart connected to the right horse. I don't know. And it wasn't until he shot that man in the back and somebody, thank God, happened to record it after he lied, that finally they had to just do a punctuous pilot and wash their hands of him. Police officers don't start off killing people. There's always red flags.
That is a great point. So I'm getting a couple questions on, how can civilians how can we make things better? Do we want to push transparency? Do we want to have the community get involved? Do we want more accountability for our officers? How do we do that without creating a war with cops, right? I don't want a war with cops, but I want better cops, right? It's what I want. I want better cops. How can civilians, everyday Americans, how can we do this?
And so it's not a training issue. Let me say that, because I know you talked about it. It's not a training issue. And so what the community can do is get involved, get engaged. I know personally, I have been to community meetings where our police chief, Charlie Beck, when he was up for his second term, and they gave an opportunity for community members in different parts of the city, 3 different occasions, to come and meet and talk and express yourself. And when I went, people who look like me, it was me and 2 others. You gotta not be lazy. You gotta get involved and get engaged. You gotta hold these police chiefs accountable, and in turn have them hold their officers accountable. It does no one it's a disservice to the community when you have an officer who's engaged in multiple uses of force, when you can see that he's barreling to a murder on duty, state sanctioned, right? Murder, and you do nothing to stop it.
So how can we? I feel, I'm just being very forward with you. I live in a major city, right? I live in the biggest city in the country. I feel powerless, to be forward with you. I do. I feel powerless. If they murdered Eric Garner, and so, right? And every time I talk about this situation, right, what I get is, well, cops are going it's dangerous job, dangerous job. There hasn't been a cop killed by a non-cop in New York City in 3 years. 3 cops have been killed in New York City in the last couple of years by other cops. But no one who's not a cop has killed a New York City cop in 3 years. And then that was one, and then like a couple years before there was another. So it's rare and there's over 30,000 cops in New York City, 8 million people, and one hasn't been killed in 3 years. But I still feel like if I say something, that's the attack I get, and people don't want to hear it.
You have to say it. You have to say it. And understand, when you hear pushback from people like Pat Lynch, I call him the Mouth, over in New York.
Yes,
you know, him and the other guys who are presidents of the Fraternal Order of Police, their job is their defense, if you will, although they're police officers. But listen, I've not seen a president of an FOP that hasn't seen the shooting of a Black or brown person that doesn't
100%.
seem to excite them. So they're going to always say the same thing. They're going to say, well, we haven't seen everything. Police officers are trained and required to make split-second decisions. Listen, you're required to make split-second decisions in your day-to-day activities. When you decide to get up in the morning and get in your car, you got to figure out, okay, which lane am I going to get in? How fast am I going to drive? You got to do defensive driving. So having a police officer be required to think is somehow intrusive before he pulls a trigger is offensive.
Right.
And so what needs to happen is people need to create what I call a paper trail. Don't get on the phone and call the police station. Write letters. Police departments are averse to publicity. Every police department now has a Twitter. They're on Instagram and they're on Facebook. So you go public. And when you write that letter, I say to Lottie Dottie and everybody, and CC everybody on the letter. Because what happens is, if you write a letter to one person, maybe the captain might, misplace it, his secretary lost it. But when you write it to the captain, when you write it to the sergeant of that officer, when you write it to the commanding officer at Internal Affairs Group, when you write it to the mayor, the governor, and everybody else that you can think of.
No, that's brilliant. I never even thought of that.
You CC everybody. If you have an independent civilian review board, you include them. And then what you do, they're not going to tell you, but what you do is you say, please, I would like to know how this matter is resolved, or we say adjudicated. Mm-hmm. How is this thing finally resolved? Could you please tell me? Just like if you go to the grocery store and the clerk at the register is nasty, you're going to call corporate. Call corporate. Call corporate, write a letter, go public. They absolutely hate it.
Most people either want to send a tweet and complain, or they want to complain on Facebook about this bad thing, or they want to call up and yell at somebody and feel better. But you're saying, no, make this official. Get a letter, email that letter to everybody and say, please respond to me on how this was taken care of. That is amazing advice. I'm so glad you said that. I hope everyone watching gets that. That's amazing advice. So don't just go on Facebook and get mad, but also write that email, send it to everybody, and ask for resolution. I love that. That's amazing.
And then the other thing that I say, because I say what I say, and I get accused of being anti-police. I'm not. I spent 20 years of my life there. But what I also say is, and it drives the young people crazy, but listen, get on the job. How many times have we seen folks who are wrongly incarcerated, and the first thing they do is go to jail, go to the library, become an attorney, get out and help others? Why not, if the police stop you and rub you raw, why not say, you know what, I'm going to go get on that damn police department? Because listen, when I was on the LAPD, and I just had a little small sphere of influence, but I felt like I was effective in some regard, because when you work with me, back in the day, the thing was, you stop a black man and you sit him on the curb in his nice clothes. When you work with me, we don't sit people on the curb. That's not how we train. So let me tell you what we're trained to do. We're trained to, if you scare me, if you just scare me, then I'm going to put handcuffs on you, because like they go on, they come off. I'll put handcuffs on you and I'll set you in the back of my police car. That's dignified. That's professional. And if you're not who I think you are, if you didn't do what I thought you did, I'll take the handcuffs off. I'll apologize. I'll give you a business card and off you go. But if I'm not on the job, I can't have that kind of influence. How amazing would it have been to have me be the partner officer of that Aaron Dean in Texas when he went to the window of a Tatiana Jefferson and looked in and saw her playing video? If I was with Aaron Dean, I would have said, dude, put your gun up. What the hell? Put the gun up. But if I'm not there, if I'm not on the job, I can't have that kind of influence. And there's a way to do this job. And you cannot sell your soul, make a deal with the devil, but you gotta be there.
Got it. Okay. Jessica's asking, should we as civilians, should we be trying to create some kind of mental health support, almost like a nonprofit or a civilian agency, so that cops can come, maybe anonymously, or maybe in some way they can come, and those who might want some help, but to your point, don't want to admit it, don't want to get ribbed by the guys around them, that kind of thing. Is that a helpful way of going down this road to have a better police force?
I don't say no to anything, but what I can tell you about police culture and police mentality, and even when you do make them go, because understand, officers realize that there's certain things they can say and they can't. Because if they say the wrong thing, guess what? They'll take your gun. It's hard to be a police officer without a gun.
Right.
So they're gonna, but that's okay. Because at least if they're forced to sit down and listen, maybe they may hear something that might resonate, that might click, that might turn that crazy switch off. I don't know. So I don't say no to anything, but police departments, every police department has a behavioral service department.
Sure.
They have a place instituted, part of that mechanism. But officers, especially guys, they are not going to go. They are not going to self-report.
So let me ask you something else here. And this is the part that I'm torn on, right? The rioting that's happening right now. I get why they're right. I understand the anger. My daughter is 16. And, she is so upset about this. She's going crazy over this. She's getting banned from TikTok because she's putting nasty TikTok videos on. I mean, she wants to do something. She's like, Dad, we got to do something. She wants to act, right? She wants to. And I get that. And I get the rioters. I get their anger. I get what they want to do. At the same time, I don't want them burning their own communities down. I don't want that also. But I get the anger and the frustration. And I also don't want cops to feel scared, because when cops feel scared, they get more aggressive. And I don't want more pain on this. I don't want more people going in the system. I mean, you've got to be torn too. Am I wrong?
Well, here's the thing. Cops are not going to get more scared. The ones that are out there operating scared, they don't need to be there, and they should have been siphoned out, but they're there. And listen, and let's not just pretend that they're scared, because I don't think officers do what they do because they're scared. We know from a DOJ report that KKK have infiltrated police departments and they have been recruited. So let's call a thing a thing. But what needs to happen is that these young people need to get engaged, get involved, the right way, in a meaningful way. I don't like to see communities destroyed, because I remember when the Rodney King riots happened, and I
Yes.
remember, entire post office facilities were burned down. And then a week
Yes.
later, everybody's like, how the hell do I get my mail? Well,
Yes.
knucklehead, you burned down the damn post office.
Right.
And
Yes.
so, they're over there burning up Target, and somebody gonna need some lotion tomorrow, and they ain't gonna be able to go get it.
Right.
So I don't think that that's effective. I get the frustration. I
Yes.
get that, folks want something done. And that's why I say there's not one thing, it's multifaceted. If you're really bothered by this, and everybody, we go through this every time there's a major event. And then in about 48 hours, because that's about as long as we can stay focused, folks change channels until it's something else. And so if you're really bothered by what happened to George Floyd, and if you're bothered by Breonna Taylor being shot in her home because police officers came at 1 o'clock in the morning with
Yes.
a no-knock warrant, or because Ahmaud Arbery was shot and killed by a vigilante, self-deputized civilian, then what you need to do is, and by the way, Glenn County Police Department told McMichaels that they were deputizing him and the owner of that home, if you have any problems, don't call us, call Greg McMichael. So you got to vote. You got to vote, because every police chief serves at the pleasure of a mayor who's an elected official.
Right.
Every sheriff is an elected official. Some
DAs.
DAs are elected officials, and they understand votes. And so you got to vote. We have an administration right now that has no appetite for investigating civil rights violations. We saw them wait 5 years in the case of Eric Garner, waited until the 11 o'clock hour to decide that they weren't going to do anything with regards to investigating. And be clear, that commissioner over there, O'Neill in New York, didn't fire Pantaleo because he suddenly had some kind of conscious thought about it. Pantaleo had been sitting on the desk, I read, earning $93,000 a year, sitting on the desk. But it wasn't until that civilian review board, the independent civilian review board, started looking through the paperwork, and they said, well, sheesh, he lied. That's why he was fired. If you go back and you listen to what Commissioner O'Neill said, he said Pantaleo was ineffective. Ineffective. That's code talk. That means that he lied. A police officer can't be a police officer once you've been a proven liar. That means you can't arrest people. You can't go to court. You can't raise your hand and swear under the penalty of perjury. You're ineffective. And so we know that this current administration has no appetite for going after these people. And while it sounds good and sexy for the DA and the state attorney general over in Georgia to say, I'm asking the DOJ and FBI and William Barr, give me a break, to look into the shooting of Ahmaud Arbery, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I don't know the mayor's heart over in Minneapolis. I've seen him on TV. He seems like a swell guy. But I think as the mayor, if he really wanted charges filed, that would have happened yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking.
No, I'm with you. And this goes back to what you talked about, right? A paper trail is critical. We as civilians, we have to be able to not just get mad on Facebook or Twitter, but to actually send the appropriate emails to the appropriate people and ask for follow-up, right?
And over, not just once, over and over. And then you tell 5 people to do the same thing and have each one of them tell 5 people to do the same thing. Because listen, we know that it can happen. We saw these officers lose their job in a matter of 24 hours in Minneapolis. So when they say due process and police officer bill of rights and we got to this and that and we need to send them home with pay for 30 days, you know that all of that is BS because they didn't wait 30 days.
They didn't. Exactly right. As soon as when we put the pressure on them, it actually did work. And that's the point I see you're saying. You're saying that the point is we have to be able to put that pressure on them. But the second thing that really was clear to me that I didn't really get before is you're saying that every one of these people, there actually was, I should say, signs that they were going towards this, that we either as a population or as a police force didn't see it. We could have seen it and we should have seen it.
I talk about this every week on my YouTube channel, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. I also have a podcast, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks, and I talk about these issues. And I say way before it's even made known, it's just my gut, it's my sixth sense, common sense, When these things happen, I always say, this is not the first time. And I can just rattle off a list of folks who've been involved in deadly encounters that made national news. And we now know, oh my God, he did this a few months ago. He did this a couple of years ago. I mean, if you look at Dan Pantaleo's history, I can't tell you how many civil suits, because it's not their money, New York has settled behind this guy.
I know, lots. Can I ask you, now let me ask you another question that comes up, and I brought this up when I was running for governor. What do you have a view on this? Do you have a view on police officers being treated like any other professional when it comes to their employment, meaning like a doctor or a lawyer, any other professional, that they should carry their own insurance, their own E&O insurance, their own liability insurance, that if a police officer carries their own insurance, if they start doing the things you're talking about and the insurance has to pay, eventually their insurance becomes so high, or the insurer says, I'm not going to insure you anymore, in which case they lose their job because they can't procure insurance. So it doesn't matter if the police force says yes or no. And it also doesn't allow a bad cop to jump from force to force, that once they can't be insured, they're done. That's a good way of as they say, getting the bad eggs out. What do you think about that concept?
So here's what needs to happen, because there are several departments who, once you are found guilty of misconduct and terminated, because listen, generally what happens is an officer resigns. I call it, they are given the gift of resignation. Yes. So they resign, like Betty Shelby, who shot and killed Terrence Crutcher. She resigned. And then she went right over a couple of counties and got a job as a deputy sheriff. And now she's teaching other cops how to get away with murder. She calls it how to survive a critical incident. So they should be stripped of their certification, something that is given to them by post, peace officer standard and training. Part of how you attack that, and folks need to know, and so get busy, because it's going to take a little while. The unions are going to fight you like a crazy grizzly bear mama. Police Officer Bill of Rights. It provides us great cover and shelter. And the other thing that needs to happen is, they don't need insurance. Do this. Have a police officer who kills someone, who murders someone, be responsible for, I'll just say, 1.5% of the civil settlement. Whatever that civil settlement is, charge that officer personally.
Got it.
I promise you, because all cops, first of all, they're cheap. And then the male cops, they all have toys, bikes and boats and Sea-Doos and side pieces.
and baby mamas.
And that's what I said, side pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So just have to start looking about homesteading and maybe selling that house and the cabin they got at the lake, because you've got to now pay for this murder. Right. The citizens in that community are no longer going to carry your water for you. Sure. This will stop yesterday.
Got it. I like that. Well, Sergeant Dorsey, I'm glad you came. I appreciate the time that you gave me. Great conversation. Tons of people back and forth. Hundreds of people watching. I appreciate that. Is there anything you want to bring up before we kind of wrap this up?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me. I appreciate this. And for those of you who are finding out about me for the first time, I want to invite you to my social media platforms. I am Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey on Twitter, Instagram. I have a YouTube channel where every week I put up content relative to whatever is going on in the world. Sergeant Dorsey Speaks is my YouTube channel, and my podcast, available on whatever platform you listen to your podcast. And then, of course, my website has been flying by on the banner below.
Every time. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm available if anyone has a question and you want to know, what should you do? Where should you go? You can reach me at sergeantcheryldorsey@gmail.com.
Excellent. Thank you, Sergeant Dorsey. I appreciate everybody for watching. Thank you so much. Don't forget, support the Sharpe Way too. You want this to keep happening? Got to like, share, and comment. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye-bye.